The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has postponed the proposed nationwide voter revalidation exercise until the 2027 general election. The Nigerian Bar Association is raising an alarm over a political litigation trend. The legal body is warning courts to avoid political entanglement. Hello everyone, welcome to the program. This is Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimale, live for you here in our Abuja City. Thanks so much for everyone for joining us tonight. Let's tell you that President Bola Tinubu was earlier saying in Bayelsa State, alongside prominent Nigerians like former President Goodluck Jonathan, governors from several states of the Federation. The president was saying to have commissioned several projects embarked upon and completed by the governor of the state, the governor of Bayelsa State, where most of these projects were commissioned. The president, who was speaking on the podium, was promising Nigerians that the government of the Bola Tinubu administration will do more in alleviating the poverty of Nigerians. It says, particularly on the issue of the fuel price, he made comparison to Kenya and other countries who are feeling much of the pains from the rise in the price of the commodity. The president says much will be done to ensure that the pains of Nigerians are ameliorated. All right, we are understanding that as we speak today, the Independent National Electoral Commission has made up its mind with respect to the voter revalidation exercise after a meeting with the resident electoral commissioners across the different states. INEC has decided to postpone the nationwide voter revalidation exercise until after the 2027 election. The aim of the project or the exercise is to clean up and review the voter register ahead of the next elections. When a body like Nigerian Bar Association, which is supposed to be the conscience of the society and that of the Nigerian legal practice and the judiciary, speaks on the matter, it calls for our attention. They are warning about the implication of what goes on in the courtroom with our politics and what the implication will be on our democracy. Tonight, we'll be speaking with the president of the Nigerian Bar Association. But when we return, after serving you with this political roundup, we get deep into the matter and the fears of the NBA.
The African Democratic Congress, ADC, in Adamawa State is holding its local government congresses as part of court order. The State High Court in Yola, the Adamawa State capital, had restrained the African Democratic Party, ADC, from conducting the Congress in Adamawa State, pending the resolution of the suit filed by the state chairman of the party, Mr. Shehu Yohana. Mr. Yohana is challenging the conduct of the Congress, alleging interference and compromise by party officials. The People's Redemption Party, PRP, has sympathized with the plight of the African Democratic Congress, ADC, in the delisting of its national officials from the Independent National Electoral Commission portal. The PRP calls on the opposition parties to speak up against the action of INEC on the ADC, demanding the electoral umpire to obey the rule of law, the Nigerian Constitution, and remain apolitical rather than dabble into party politics, as has been witnessed. The national chairman of the PRP, Hakeem Baba Ahmed, made this statement after a solidarity visit to the ADC leadership in Abuja. Baba Ahmed says the PRP is standing in solidarity with the ADC as their current experience threatens the existence of multi-party democracy in Nigeria. The Yobe State Network of Civil Society Organizations is pledging to collaborate with the state government to consolidate and mobilize youth at the grassroots for the development of the state. This was disclosed by the convener of the Governance Summit, Mr. Farouk Chiromari, which was held in Damaturu, the state capital, with the theme Consolidating Governor Boli's Legacies, Sustaining the Future of Inclusivity in Governance.
Thank you so much, everyone. There you are. You've been served with your political roundup stories. So Nigeria's legal community is raising a red flag over what it calls a dangerous trend because of being drawn into the internal affairs of political parties despite clear legal limits. The Nigerian Bar Association, led by the president, Mr. Afam Osigwe, senior advocate of Nigeria, has warned that this growing wave of politically motivated litigation could undermine democratic processes ahead of the 2027 general elections. At the heart of the concern is the interpretation of the Electoral Act 2022, particularly provisions that restrict judicial interference in intra-party disputes. Yet, courts continue to entertain such cases, sometimes issuing orders that reshape party leadership and internal structures. The NBA is now threatening disciplinary action against lawyers and calling on the judiciary to exercise restraint. So is Nigeria's democracy being quietly reshaped in the courtroom? And where should a line be drawn between legal redress and political manipulation? Joining me tonight is the president of the Nigerian Bar Association, the conscience of judiciary and the society. He is the president, Mr. Afam Osigwe, senior advocate of Nigeria. Thank you so much, Mr. President, for joining us tonight.
Thank you for inviting me, Sean.
I appreciate it. It's concerning, isn't it? The trend, and now I'm happy to see that the NBA seems to be now more proactive when you see a society ill, especially as it affects the Nigerian judiciary and our legal process, and the way you've come out to say, doing the activism that the association should be doing on one part. So in this sense, particularly about our election and the role of our courts, and there are those who have worried that our court is not a polling unit where you determine for politicians or for Nigerians who become their leaders. The people should be able to elect for themselves. But you have come out as an organization to say there is a worrying trend. What exactly have you noticed?
Well, over the years, there have been worries that the electoral process has been overly judicialized, and the fear that the judicialization of the electoral process may have politicized the judicial process, with the attendant fears of corrupt practices affecting judgments of the courts. And for us as a bar association, whose motto is to promote the rule of law, our position is quite simple. If the law has explicitly stated that courts do not have jurisdiction to entertain matters which border on internal affairs of political parties, then it behoves lawyers and the judges on the different side, on the two sides, not to be drawn into this fray. Not for the lawyers not to institute action, not to couch them in some smart way as to make the courts have jurisdiction, and for the courts to refrain from making orders that make it difficult for the political parties to function, or party office holders to function, or to put political parties into confusion, or to make them leaderless. And we thought that if we are guided by the law as we should be, then lawyers will not tomorrow be accused, or the courts will not tomorrow be accused of having, in one word or the other, made it difficult for democracy to thrive, especially multi-party democracy. And we thought that lawyers should exercise a higher level of restraint, likewise judges, before entertaining these matters or allowing them to clog the judicial process or being led into making orders that statutorily they cannot make.
Yeah, and it's interesting though, and those who think that there are some things to be argued in court. For example, if the Supreme Court and the Constitution has clearly stated that if someone has been sworn in a particular manner, cannot run for another office, and lawyers are still going to now be finding out from court whether or not the person can still go back, when the Supreme Court has laid this foundation clear, and the frustration is sometimes to the eminent judges at the bench who are wondering that this is a sheer waste of time of the court. But in this sense, Mr. President, how clear is the law, especially the Electoral Act 2022, leaving room 2026 rather, leaving any room at all for judicial intervention in party affairs?
It's very explicit. If you look at Section 83, it says that no court shall exercise jurisdiction with respect to internal affairs of a political party. And the section went on to say that where an action is commenced in negation of this provision, that the court shall not make any interim order of injunction or interlocutory injunction, and should leave everything to the final determination of the matter. Now, in prefacing your question, you made reference to where matters are settled, and it's unfortunate that lawyers and courts pretend not to know that certain factual situations have been decided by the courts, the apex court, so that there is nothing new to be decided. While I will not use the example that you have given, and I will use the example of where a member of the executive, say governor or deputy, changes party. You see people litigating it as if it's a new thing. While as far back as 2006, in the case involving Atiku Abubakar, who was then Vice President to Olusegun Obasanjo, the Supreme Court had made it very clear that losing one seat only affects a member of the legislature and not the executive. And yet people still go to court, and court make judgments that are not in line with this decision of the Supreme Court that I've referenced. And it shows you either the lawyers have been mischievous or pretend not to know what they do, because I doubt if they don't know it, or the judges who may write such judgments are corrupt or incompetent. And our disciplinary process should work both against the lawyers involved in these actions and the judges who make such decisions.
I mean, in this sense, what happens, Mr. President, where there are disputes as to the leadership of a political party? Yes, there are decisions made by a group in the party, but yet there are unresolved issues and there are disputes generating from such. Where do they go? So
the courts and the INEC should have a dispute resolution mechanism for this. And the parties should have it as a part of the provisions in their constitution. The law as it is that the courts do not have jurisdiction, and should not also, where people have shut their eyes to these clear provisions of the law, the courts should not grant any order of injunction. And this brings me to a point which you did not raise, but which I would like to raise. And I also think, considering the confusion that is arising in our body politic in recent times, our courts should not make such orders as using Latin maxims like
status quo
antebellum or status quo pendelitis. The court should make clear orders to what it means, so that
there's no ambiguity.
There's no ambiguity. I see situations where people go away rejoicing that the order was in their favor, now giving room for mischief or for anybody to interpret it the way they want. Where a court has chosen to make an order, it should clearly what it has set out to do, and not hide behind any Latin maxim. Seeing that in some other climate may not be a problem, but it seems that we have a peculiar situation in Nigeria where we choose to interpret laws the way it suits us. They're also leading to confusion. Because if the court means the person that was there before coming to court, or the person that make it clear,
even with names and
instances, so that when people go away, there will be no doubt as to what the court has ordered.
Status quo antebellum is one guy that if some politician catch today, they will strangle him.
Because it creates confusion.
Status quo antebellum is a major problem in our politics today.
We rendered it meaningless. Yeah. It's been gutted of any meaning.
Yeah.
So our courts should avoid using such phrases and specify what orders they are making, so that nobody will be left in doubt, or no administrative body would have to interpret it and then try to give its own decision on it.
Due honor to your long years of practice and knowledge, status quo and status quo antebellum. There seems to be a definitive understanding into what it means. Sorry, apologies. But the question here is, how far does it take you back into the crisis and to the problems?
I wouldn't want to attempt any definition of it, explanation of it. Yeah. Safe to suggest that courts should refrain from using it in making their orders. The court should specify what they are really asking parties to do, and not hide behind status quo antebellum, status quo pendelitis. Let's not use them.
I blame the law teachers who also teach a Latin maxims.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's universal in the common law countries, an accepted thing. But we seem to have a penchant for doing things the other way, or interpreting it the way it suits us, not the internationally accepted way. So to avoid confusion and to avoid a lot of hair being split, a lot of ink being dissipated, trying to explain what it means and what it does not mean, and then we still end up not agreeing, the courts should avoid using them and make clear orders as to what they mean to avoid confusion.
Section 83 is very central to your argument.
It is.
And you look at it, you wonder whether this mischief or the deliberateness in wanting to mess up our democracy, who are we to blame directly? The lawyers or the courts?
All of us. The lawyers who see these provisions and still go to court. The judges who see this and waste so much time instead of asking parties to address it. Do I have jurisdiction in the light of this position? I mean, one of the things you're taught as a law student is that law is in the bosom of the judge. Mm-hmm. So the judge is presumed to know the law. Yeah. And a judge, having read the papers filed before him, said, look, this matter is not about internal crisis of a police. Can you address me on whether I have jurisdiction? And we don't have to waste so much time. And that section also talked about such matters being heard quickly. Accelerated hearing. Expedited hearing. And we're not getting that. And orders are made. And there are strict timelines for the doing of certain things. And the matters are pending. So of what use will a decision rendered after those timelines are passed? What use is making of an order that creates confusion as to what that status quo really means?
Let us see.
Or makes the compliance of that difficult, left in interpretation of all the parties and the whims and caprices of those who are involved.
Let us see. Exception is a very fundamental principle in law practice. Are there exceptions to where courts can intervene in inter-party dispute?
Well, I wouldn't know. If you look at the statute, it would appear that there isn't in internal crisis. But when it talks about who is the candidate representing a party, the primaries, the court would have jurisdiction. And the whole essence, if you ask me, is to reduce the number of political cases that go to our courts. In the next few weeks, our courts will be clogged by political cases, and many judges will only be hearing political cases. And this is a country that has rising litigation, where the time it takes to file a case till you get judgments is increasing. And then all these things will snowball into appeals that may end up at the doorsteps of the Supreme Court. So the less the number of cases that get instituted in our courts that our judges are involved in, the less the pressure of work on them, and also the temptation for people to try to corrupt the judicial process to have their way. And essentially, the negative perception of the judiciary at the bar will maintain arise more from political cases than from commercial transactions.
Is rainy season for election lawyers because this is their time?
It would appear so. Because if there are a large volume of cases that can go to court, those who are involved in them will be very busy. And so, as we say, that will be their season. So, I mean, they will have a lot of things going on.
But what do you say to politicians who argue that courts are the only pathway to justice?
No, they're not. Because it's not all the time that court gives justice. Sometimes you get just a judgment. Sometimes you get a period victory. You don't assuage the parties. Sometimes mediation may leave people with a win-win situation and not a win-lose situation. So litigation is not necessarily the best because it brings out a lot of bitterness and enmity between persons.
Well, I mean, you look at the nature of litigation is literally like going to war. Different types of dispute resolution. Court sometimes it could give you justice, but may not be the best ways to resolving dispute. But the big question here, let us seek, is INEC, which is the regulator, the umpire. We're supposed to be umpires, which is supposed to help also to resolve this matter. Sometimes we rely on the courtrooms to also help it. So politicians and political parties look up to the almighty regulator, help us in this matter. The almighty regulator look up to the court, help me in this matter. I don't know how to resolve this matter. Because in the first place, these guys have gone to different courts of coordinate jurisdiction. One in Gombe, one in Anambra, another one in Gombe, another one goes to, and they go all around sketching for court orders. So how do you resolve that kind of thing? INEC is in a big quagmire, and you're a very good friend. Who is the INEC chairman, Professor Joash Hamufit, a very brilliant scholar and senior advocate. But then that man is on a hot seat. I'm not sure anyone in this country wants to be in the kind of seat the man is sitting right now.
So, what's the question,
The question here is where the INEC, everybody looks up to INEC, but INEC looks up to the courts.
Now, where there are two contending parties, to avoid being accused of taking sides, and especially if the matter is in court, it will be understandable if INEC looks up to the courts for guidance. But if matters were straightforward, there are no litigation, there are no conflicting judgments, then it will be easy for INEC to take a decision. But where like people have gone to shop, because we talked about forum shopping, sometimes people go to some destinations to get favorable orders. It happened in Imo, where somebody went to, what's the name of that place in somewhere in the far north, with respect to primaries that took place in Imo State involving ABGA, All Progressive Grand Alliance, I think that's the name, to get a court order and a judgment. Imo. Far, I think Jiga was somewhere. Yeah. Brendan Kudu, yeah. To get an order. That's clear. And politicians do it. Somebody will go to a court and quietly do a litigation and get an order. Sometimes they keep it until the need arises. And sometimes those cases are not well defended. If you were INEC, you would only look up to the courts to provide clarity as to what to do. And so you blame those who are involved, the politicians who are desperate, who will go to any length to get order, the lawyers who are willing tools to be used against the rules of the teaching in the profession that no lawyer should be a tool in the hands of the client to do what the client wants. We should be bold enough to tell the client, I'm sorry, we can't do this because this is what the law says. Not about find a way around it. And the judges who would make orders that appear to be in direct conflict with the law. So if you blame one particular person, then you'll be missing the point. And we are worried at the bar station because we recall that the annulment of June 12 was seemingly justified by those who annulled it because there were conflicting court orders.
And the
gaps were there. And so they were like, this one said announce, this one said don't, this one said don't conduct. And they found it convenient. And lawyers and judges played a role in that. And so we always have to remind our members and the judges, the legal profession indeed, that if the legal and judicial process are put to the wrong use, it may have the tendency or the possibility of truncating democracy.
Are we walking on another dangerous path at the moment in our body politic?
Well, if we continue along this line, we may be walking on a dangerous path because the courts should be seen not to take away the oxygen from the democratic context and should allow parties and the political parties to thrive, not be seen to make orders that decapitate the political parties and make it difficult for political parties to hold their own and be able to fight fairly for the votes and the mind of the people so as to win in the next general election.
Without having to sound academic, Mr. President, and trying to find solution, because your association has thousands of lawyers in his register, which means that there is also some kind of solace that the NBA also might be given not only to the body, but also, not only to the courts, but also to the Nigerian society. Is there a solution to the quagmire? And I know that you're running away from wanting to be specific and mentioning names of any person or political party, but we do know, even the newborn today understand that there is a major crisis on our hands as far as opposition politics is concerned. Mr. President, what would you suggest as a way out?
My suggestion is that multi-party democracy must thrive, and all of us should be committed to ensuring that it works. The people must be able to have choices. The political parties must thrive and be able to hold those in government accountable. Otherwise, democracy becomes meaningless because no particular political party is capable of providing a shade for every person to hide under. And they do, even though our political parties are not driven by agenda, never mind whether they may identify as progressive or whatever, but in reality, there is no discernible political ideology that drives them. They would appear to be merely driven by a quest to attain political power. But whatever we do, we should ensure that the democratic space is not narrowed so as to snuff out the oxygen from it and make it difficult for those who are not in government and in opposition to try, because those in power today were once in opposition, and those in opposition today may be in power someday. And so for people to also have choices, and for it to take us serious as a place where democracy is really practiced, we should, by our words and action, be seen not to be putting the law to the wrong use to make it difficult for political parties to thrive and properly do their work.
Please shine the light for us to see tonight. Everyone is waiting for the court especially what INEC said. And he said, I'm not going to recognize this. What would you prefer as a solution in that quagmire?
What I would prefer that the court should hear this matter quickly. INEC has taken a decision, and because the matter is sub judice, I would not want to comment on it. But that's one dead situation that requires urgent judicial intervention, considering the strict timelines we have, so that we have a clear-cut idea about what should be done. Pretending that this is not a time, and it puts the judiciary under the spotlight, his ability to do the right thing, to apply the law, is being put to the test. And the whole Nigerians are watching to see how the judiciary handles this. And time is of the essence. And the matter should not drag on in such a way as to defeat the essence of the provisions of the Electoral Act 2026, which requires accelerated hearing of cases. And in the consideration that some parties may have found themselves, there is need for urgent judicial intervention to resolve the matter one way or the other, so that people can really say this is the exact position of things. Whichever court does that is up to the parties who are involved, whether it is the appellate court or the trial court, which has been ordered to hear the matter quickly.
If this thing gets out of hand and what you're preferring as the solution is not heeded to, we should bring the judiciary for the escalation that might come out of it.
Well, let's wait until that happens. But then if it is the fault of judiciary that it fails to hear this matter quickly so as to provide a solution, then the obvious blame will be on it.
But you as an organization, you are urging restraint to lawyers, and the application that you have described that lawyers are filing, but are you able to also caution and discipline lawyers beyond making statements and warning them?
So, the rules of professional conduct impose a duty on every lawyer, or any lawyer who knows that a lawyer has violated the rules of professional conduct. And so if anybody believes that a lawyer has acted in violation of Section 83 and thereby liable to discipline, it is for those persons to bring petition. We can't go hunting them down. If any is brought to our knowledge that we on our own can present a petition, we will. But it has a process, and but it goes through processes. So there will be an investigation, and if a finding of prima facie is made, then the person will go on for a hearing before the Legal Practitioner Disciplinary Committee. But the bottom line is that lawyers should be aware that we have a duty, solemn duty, not to put the judicial processes to the wrong use, not to be a tool in the hands of the politician, not to use litigation to manipulate the political process, not to use it to make it difficult for democracy to thrive. And our members should be aware of this so that we will not end up being the villains or being persons who are blamed for some wrong going on in the political scene. The lawyers should be above board, and as professionals, members of a noble profession, as we say, we want our members by their actions to show that they appreciate that fact, that will carry a duty and a responsibility, and that will act in a proper manner that ennobles the electoral process and not the one that defeats it.
The RPC and the provision of raising a petition is very clear. And I know that the precarious situation the association is, I'm not sure the association can generate a petition against any of its members without a petitioner coming
No, the association can.
Yeah,
There's nothing that says it cannot.
So the question is, if anybody doesn't come to petition when you're wrongdoing...
If the association has sufficient fact, it will.
Well, I mean, there are such things in the public right now.
Well, you see, if there is enough material in public, the lawyers involved, and what way they may have run foul of the law. Of course, why not?
But I mean, you are working closely with the NJC. The NJC, is the body that is saddled with the responsibility of also doing the administration of our court system. But the question is that the judges that some of these lawyers run to should also be weary of taking some of these cases and administering or entertaining, especially the heads of these courts. Are you able to speak to them also and make this advocacy clear that we are in the election season and our democracy is going to be truncated if we are not careful? And the direct interpretation is that where the society is being messed up, the courtroom also cannot exist.
Yeah. Yes.
Is this awareness being raised to the NJC?
It's part of an agenda we want to pursue next week, seeking meeting with some heads of courts, and it's part of the conversations we want to hold with them.
I'm wondering, Mr. President, a lot of these applications that I'm imagining that it's going to be widespread now as we're going into to the election period. But again, it does look to me that some of these political parties enjoy some of these unnecessary disputes.
No, they do. When you're out for mischief, you would enjoy it. When you're out for mischief, when you want to achieve an ulterior motive, it's likely because some of the cases are not such that people can't sit down and resolve. And then you see people go all the way to the Supreme Court, come back and go all the way to the Supreme Court, and sometimes over nothing.
And this concept of go to court, it's a very bad...
No, it is a very bad statement, because you see, if you look at the arrogance with which those who make that statement make it, you sometimes will not be blamed for going away believing that they make that statement because they are confident that they have an idea of what the outcome would be. And no judicial process should be viewed in the light that people may already not have an idea what the outcome would be. That there may not be fairness, that the man is just daring you to just go there and waste your time. It may not necessarily be the situation, but that is perception they give when they say go to court. So it's more like might being right. Just get yourself declared winner, win, then let them go, and waste their time. We're already here. We'll defeat them still.
Are you worried the narrative that some judges are in the pocket of some politicians?
Well, sometimes it's a public perception that is getting stronger and stronger by the day, and it's not good for the judiciary.
And what are you doing about that?
We can do the advocacy we can keep talking about maintaining the independence of the judiciary. We keep talking about giving money to the judiciary to build its own infrastructure. In a program here in this studio sometime last year, I made a point that it is wrong for the executive to build courtrooms, buy cars for judges, invite judges and hand over vehicles to them. But sometimes it would appear that the judiciary is happy. The judges are happy to be paraded by politicians receiving cars, are paraded to lay foundation stone or I built for my judges, as if the person is doing them a favor, as if the governor or minister or whoever is spending his own personal money. And it demeans the judges, it demeans the judiciary. It gives the impression of an incestuous relationship between the bench.
So it's a moral problem.
It's a moral problem because how do you give confidence to the person who's coming against such a governor or such a person in government that he would get justice? When they see you smiling and then receiving gifts from them in a manner that suggests some degree of servitude. There's no way those watching it will get away believing that if you have a case before those courts,
and I'll take an inference, Mr. President, on conduct for judicial officers, which clearly state, as a lawyer, you cannot even go to the house of a judge.
No, you can't.
That's in the rule of professional conduct. And it also states what the relationship between a lawyer and a judge should be. In that sense, one will wonder, maybe the heads of the court could they have rejected some of these cars, some of these houses? Could that have been the right attitude to it? Accepting it.
I think so. Our position at the bar is that if the courts need houses, it should be put in their budget and the courts should be allowed to handle it. The process, the way these houses are built, the way the announcements are made, the way the judges are gathered, heads of court, and then make the public display of the house being handed over to them is demeaning. And it robs them of the perception of being independent. It gives the impression that they're in the pocket of such politicians.
Is our judiciary independent?
That remains to be seen. Statutorily, yes. Constitutionally, yes. But in reality, the perception is that the judiciary is not fully independent. Because some governors control how the courts, the judges, control the effect, erode the independence of the judges, they say, by refusing to release budgeted sums to them. And so sometimes a chief judge is reduced to go into the government house to beg for a release of a statutory allocation to them. So to that extent, it is not independent and cannot be independent. But if there's financial autonomy where they have to function and where a governor can not refuse to release money to them because they gave adverse judgments against the government, then they will be independent. But to the extent that the governors control the purse strings and determine whether they get new cars, determine whether their buildings get refurbished or rebuilt, or built at all, or what kind of infrastructure the courts get to function with, then to that extent they can't be said to be independent.
Is it not even a natural course when you build a house for a judge? Do you expect to get a judgment that's not in your favor from that courtroom? And therefore, there are those who say maybe the NBA should have come harder to the judiciary to say, collecting these houses, collecting these cars is tantamount to putting lawyers on the other side. If government is against any private citizen in any matter, and the government is provided houses for judges, do you expect that same court to give judgment against?
Well, I believe I've answered. It's about perception. It may not be real, but it also takes a moral authority from you. For example, for every month a governor supplies you diesel in a manner that is suggestive of a gift, then the next day the transformer of the courts gets blown, you call the governor, you beg him, supplies it. Somehow, somewhere, some people will feel morally obligated not to offend that person, especially their judicial officers. And so their independence and their ability to render even-handed justice will be hampered. And so the ordinary persons coming before the courts are already disadvantaged and may not get judgment or may go away believing that they cannot get justice from those courts.
In a case, I'm referring to attitude and conduct of some lawyers in the courtroom, a case where you find out that a lawyer called out a judge saying, you are so judge, inferring that judge is in the pocket of a politician. In a case where you find interview being conducted in the courtroom, in a case where you find a suspect under trial calling a judge names and have to be taken out of courtroom, there are situations and incidents that I've never seen in all my life that has happened in recent time in our courtrooms. There's a place we call the hallowed
chambers,
chamber, and the temple of justice that have been desecrated. And imagine that the NBA would have come hard in this in defense of the judiciary.
Oh, we did that. We had to issue a statement a while ago when a certain individual turned the courtroom into a place for makeup and conducting interview, and the bar condemned that, and also spoke in defense of the senior advocate who challenged that because such things should not take place in a court. Interviews by journalists should take place outside of the court present, outside, not within the courtroom. The courtroom should be respected. And it does not matter whether the judge is there or not. Like I said, it's a hallowed chambers. It's a place of justice and should not be reduced to theatrics. And we maintain that position. And then when the language is used by a person in the manner that you have described, it amounts to contempt of court. And the judge would take the proper actions. The only problem would arise where the judge, in proceeding for contempt, acts in a manner that makes it personal, like asking a lawyer to kneel down or to turn around and face the wall and hands up. These are not acceptable punishments. So if contempt is in the face of the court, there's a procedure for initiating contempt committal proceedings or trial if it's outside of the court. So the court is not without power to protect itself, and it is for the judge to utilize that.
And you know what people say, Nemo Judas Inkososua. The concept that when the judge meets out a punishment to someone, in which case the judge,
so it depends. Yes, that's why I said there's a procedure. If it happens before you that you may have to be a witness, you may, but you can't try summarily. So it depends on the circumstance, and you have to follow the procedure. Once you follow the right procedure and come to a finding that the person is deserving of punishment for being in contempt of court, why not? But you can't, that's why you can have a person being in contempt of court and the judge end up getting blamed for not going about it the proper way. It's about doing it the proper way. That's the most important thing. But we must protect the institution, we must protect the courtroom, and protect the person of the judicial officer who presides in the court. And we should not reduce it to a child's play. And should be mind the language we use in addressing the court, even when the court has taken a decision that is not to our liking.
Mr. President, we're going into a very critical election cycle. What is your biggest fear?
My biggest fear is that the judiciary and the lawyers may put the law to the wrong use and be blamed for if anything goes wrong with the electoral process.
So how do we curtail that?
Well, you made reference to a press release We want our members to be circumspect in the matters they take to the court. We also want the courts in where that matters have been filed in negation of the provisions of the law, not to rush to grant injunctions, but to hear these matters quickly and make findings, and then, where necessary, impose punitive costs to be paid personally by the lawyers, and also to refer the lawyers involved for disciplinary action, and also where any judge has also acted in flagrant violation of the law. For also petitions to be presented to the NJC against them, we must sanitize the organs table. We must sanitize the legal profession. We can't be seen to be willing tools to do the bidding of politicians.
How far is the NBA willing to go?
We're willing to go as far as possible, and our members have been sensitized to be on the lookout for this and report possible.
Because they think that you have the teeth, but you don't bite.
We don't have the teeth the way people think, because as a disciplinary committee, we can only make a report. We, an advocacy group, we draw attention to things, and we can, in some circumstances, as an association, present petitions. But we can do much, but not so very much, because there are other organs and there are procedures. Sometimes some of these processes are not as fast as people would want them to be.
Mr. President, Nigerian Bar Association, AFAM Osegwe, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you for inviting me, Sean.
I appreciate it.
And
Thanks
have
so
a
much.
lovely weekend.
You too, sir. We take a break, everyone, but when we return, we take you to Kwara State. Yeah, Kwara State is a model and microcosm of a macrocosm in the sense of the kind of politics that we play in Nigeria in determining the zoning and some of the legal and ethnic and zoning tendencies that will determine who is next to be governor of that state. That gets our attention after this break, everyone. Join us again. Thanks so much, everyone, for staying with us. Nigeria's political spotlight is gradually turning towards 2027. And in Kwara State is a microcosm of a macrocosm. What you find in several states and even in the Nigerian larger political landscape is what you find in that state. An intense debate is already underway over who succeeds Governor Abdulrahman Abdul Razak. The heart of the conversation is zoning, equity, and whether power should rotate among the state's three senatorial districts, the Kwara North, Central, and the South, or whether competence alone should determine the next governor. Add that to a complex mix of religion, ethnicity, party calculations, and elite influence, and what emerges is a high-stakes political chessboard that could redefine Kwara's power structure tonight. We examine the permutations, the agitations, and the big questions. Who takes over Government House in 2027 is an agitation that is ongoing. And I'm being joined by Abdullahi Abdul Majid, who is the Director General and the CEO of the Adawa Trade and Investment Promotion Council, and also is the immediate past Group Managing Director of Harmony Holdings Limited in Kwara State. He's also the convener of the Legacy 2027 in Kwara State. Malam Abdul Majid, thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much indeed. Kwara State is like the larger Nigerian political picture. But what exactly is going on in Kwara? There seems to be a lot of agitation from the Kwara, people in southern Kwara who are thinking, it's our time.
Okay, so I mean, it's a quite interesting times in Kwara State, and you will find that the temperature is rising. In the last 72 hours, there's been a sudden transformation in the permutation and in the way and manner in which the dynamics of our political transition moving towards 2027 is going. I mean, prior to now, you'd find that dominant in the public space are debates around the sustenance of the legacy of the incumbent, whom without any iota of doubt has performed significantly well. If you look at where we're coming from as a state, we're coming from an era where the people rose in unison and they decided that it was about time for them to take their state into take their destinies into their hands and liberate their states. That happened in 2019. Between 2019 and 2023, and 2023 till date, a lot of observers and rational pundits of the view that the APC administration has outperformed the 2-3 successive administration of the leading opposition and the Saraki dynasty in Kwara State. Having said that, the natural sequence is around ensuring that the governor has a competent, loyal successor who is able to take on the mantle of leadership, consolidate on what he has achieved, and move it forward. Now, unfortunately, there's a twist in the dynamics. You would find that there are lots of very competent aspirants who have been bracing up for the big goal ahead. And don't forget, the leader of the party, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is incidentally going to be on the ballot in what is yet to be seen, but largely expected to be one of the most keenly contested elections in 2027 when he gets back on the ballot for his second-term election. So for us in Kwara State, it's a double deal. First and foremost, there's a need for us to ensure that we keep leadership to sustain the gains that we have made. Point number two, ensure that the citizens who took the audacity to be able to give power to the APC, they're not disappointed between what happens at the time when our performance is this high and when we transit.
All right. So when you talk about performance and upholding the legacy, so there are those who will be asking, what legacy? The time that you're talking about, interestingly, those who observe the politics and the governance in Kwara State, security has never been this bad. Is that the kind of legacy you're talking about?
I mean, basically, when we speak to legacy, we'd like to talk first and foremost about the audacious and bold policy reforms, the system reset. The fact that in Kwara right now you have, an urban transformation that is unparalleled. You have a situation where the economy of Kwara State has been diversified.
With insecurity,
the state used to be
people are not able to
the state used
well
to be a mono economy state where all we relied on was FAC allocation.
You remember what
speak right now?
Kwara is being
we're
called
doing great in the creative industry.
Harmony, state of harmony. But this harmony is being the order of the day.
You need to agree with me with the fact that the issue of security is not an isolated concern. You must understand that this trails back to, strategic disharmony, that had happened in the Sahel. There are things that affect the entire of the African, the Sahel, the horn of the Sahel. These are things that have spanned from the disruptions in Libya down to Mali, down to Chad, Niger. It started affecting the extreme parts of northern Nigeria. And as we speak right now, Kwara State appears to be the last kid that was not affected. It's in. So it is a dynamic that is ravaging the whole world. But the question that people would like to ask and
the issue of handling is how is that government? Because it's the government that said Otoge to the Saraki, and there is a comeback from what we are saying. So, in Kwara State, the opposition led by Bukola Saraki and the PDP seems to be gaining momentum, and they're asking that, well, if you told us Otoge at a time 8 years ago, Otoge meaning that enough is enough.
So it was Otoge to corruption.
Yeah.
It was Otoge to maladministration. It was Otoge to years of unpaid salaries. When civil servants had to go beg in the market, they had to do peasant jobs. You had civil servants who were even caught stealing because salaries were not paid. It was in the days when salaries were rationed. Some got 15% in some months, 30% in months when they are lucky. It was Otoge to those things. It was Otoge
What about what they're saying now? Otoge to killing of innocent, Otoge to insecurity, Otoge to poverty, Otoge to citizens running away from their homestead and their villages and running out of town.
Agreeable. Are
you hearing that or not?
It's a sober point for all of us. And you see, we cannot come into this studio and then we rationalize the fact that it's okay for people to have their homesteads destroyed, to begin to live in, persistent fear of the fact that banditry and then armed herdsmen will displace their communities. But I need to be very frank with you. These are situations that are not only within the capacity and the constitutional ability of governors to fix. However, we need to know that the governors are doing their best. And when you look at the way and manner in which the insecurity crisis in Kwara State was handled, it appears to be like one of the very most proactive and pragmatic that it happened in other crimes. First and foremost, I speak to you about intelligence gathering. Secondly, I speak to you about the response time to when incidents occur. Thirdly, I speak to you. The people in
Orago will not agree with you.
If you would let me.
The people in Omugo will not agree with you.
If you let me.
Some people in the part of Partigate Barotain will not agree with you.
It is understandable as people in other parts of the country, where insecurity is ravaging several parts of the country, will not agree. But what's the optics? what's the sincere efforts around, what governments are doing around their reaction to these issues? Do we have governments that are more frontal in addressing these issues, or we have governments that are indifferent, to the pains and the reality of the people?
Quickly.
The government in Kwara State is confronting this incident better. It is partnering with the federal government to address the issues, but the issues are not issues that are within its direct capacity to resolve. And then as we speak right now, there are a lot of, increased efforts.
Madam Majid, where would an average, or what should an average Kwaran think about how power, the balance of power, and how things, the pendulum, where it should swing in 2027? Who should they look for? Because the southern Kwarans are looking at opportunity to have a governor.
So, that's what all members of the political class should come to reality with. The state of affairs of the nation is a sober one. You just painted the picture of what we're going through in Kwara State. This is a moment when citizens expect that the political class should empathize with them more. And in speaking to the issues around politics of succession for 2027, they want to feel that they are carried along. They want to feel that they are prioritized. And so when we're speaking to these issues, it should not be an issue around zoning, what part of the state gets power. It's not meant to be an issue around loyalty. Who is most loyal to either the outgoing governor or to the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria? It should be around three things. Number one, it should be around competence. Number two, it should be around candidates who have what it takes to be able to confront the existential threats that we are facing in the state and in the country frontally. Number three, it should be about the ability to be able to turn around the resources, because looking at the economic strains that we're going through, citizens are going through a whole lot. Post-2027, you cannot expect that with global geopolitics, some magic wand will happen and then there will be relief. You need administrators who have got the capacity to be able to get water out of the rock. So when we get to such narratives, we believe that what the party should be focused on doing right now is trying to see how we can get the best candidate out of all of the very, very credible aspirants that are juggling to succeed the president.
If parents consider your party, because I've heard about Salih Mustafa, I've heard about Yaya, Ambassador Yaya Seriki, I've heard about Senator Olori Egbe. That is in your party. But the PDP and Bukola Saraki, they are in the wing and say, well, we're sending these guys out of town.
Okay, so I said this to you for free. When you look at 2019, 2023, and the dynamics that determines, what happened in terms of elections, our party still has one of the best credentials. Looking at candidates, you spoke about Salih Mustafa, amazing gentleman, who is the senator of Kwara Central. As we speak, when you look at his records, he won with very good votes. You look at underdogs like Ambassador Fataya Seriki Gambari, a consummate businessman, one of the most successful mining magnates in the country. These are the anchors who have held the party and the people together. Don't forget, that man, for example, who is like one of the individuals that the party has got, was DG of the campaign council of the APC 2019 in 2023, is one of the largest humanitarian interventions, in the whole of Kwara State. These are people that the people look up to, not the party. And so for us, what the party should be looking at is rallying around support around the best of its actors.
We're totally out of time.
Have an open primary election and ensure that we have a candidate that the people believe in to fly the ticket of the party in 2027.
Convener of the Kwara Legacy Group. Thanks so much indeed.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's
quite sad we didn't have enough time to x-ray the issues.
Yeah, some other time. Thanks so much. That's our show for tonight. Man, thanks for watching. I'm Sean Wakimale. God bless Nigeria.